Welcome to the Marshall Pruett podcast. In our Week in IndyCar series, going to do something a little bit different this week. Following Pocono, boy, nothing happened there to talk about. After Pocono and some other recent news, more than 170 questions and comments come in via social media. And with that volume and knowing how long it would take to get through that many of those from my guests, but even more from me, decided to do something I believe I've only done once before, and that is break up the weekly show into two podcasts. So here we have our interviews. Our man Santino Ferrucci just completed his second run to fourth place this year. He's been, I think, a lot more than folks expected. I know on the character side and personality side, circumspect, at least, at minimum, and it appears some folks are beginning to understand it is possible to change and to become a better human being. So that's where we start with Santino. Number of questions about this 21-year-old, who he is as a person today, and speaking about some of the things that he was accused of last year. Not all of them accurate. I know this is going to sound crazy. Not everything you read on the internet is 100% true. Nonetheless, that's where we start with Santino. Get into a wide array of things between charity efforts that he's been doing, which team he wants to drive for, thoughts about Pocono and just his aptitude on ovals in general. Good stuff. Lots of fun with the kid. Then we move on to another kid, Kory Enders, competing in the Indy Pro 2000 series, a Texas native competing for the D-Force racing team, one that he is an integral part of. Good to get to know Kory a little bit more here. So those are the two items we have for you on this episode, straight up interviews with Santino and Kory. And then we're going to move into the second episode of the week, that being your Q&A. I just completed that. It took more than 3 hours. It was fun. And as I mentioned in the opening there, I just went. So rather than try and do anything on whatever time scale and shorten this up, y'all sent in a ton, and I wanted to try and get to everything. And that opens up with about an hour on Pocono, looking at all kinds of thoughts, ramifications, things that weren't mentioned, some things that were a little questionable in terms of statements or claims made. So that's part two. Once you're done here, hopefully you will go and enjoy that. And who knows, if the volume of questions continues to remain as high as they've been of late, maybe this will just become the norm. Get the interviews in one show, and then you can move on to the other and get the Q&A that you all sent in for me. All right, well, let's get going here on the Week in IndyCar, brought to you by Cooper Tires, the Justice Brothers, TorontoMotorsports.com, and Bell Racing Helmets USA. Santino Ferrucci, great to have you back on the Week in IndyCar. It's been, I think, a little over 3 months since we had you on. You're doing all kinds of things behind the steering wheel of an Indy car to warrant being on the show fairly regularly. First of all, How are you doing after Pocono? And can you also share with folks the duties that you're just completing before calling in? Because they're really romantic and sexy and what people would expect of a young IndyCar driver.
Yeah, I mean, I'm feeling pretty good after that race. I'm going into it. I had over 120 guests with me that weekend. And, having that many people watching you live is a lot of pressure, and it's, calls for a big task. And, to do as well as place fourth was amazing, and running the top four the whole race was, another thing for sure. And I was having a lot of fun, and, I kind of wish the race didn't end short like it did, but it happens. And then, I get 2.5 days back home before I head out to St. Louis, and figured it'd be good to do a little bit of yard work and clean up the house outside for a day, and kind of prepare everything for when I leave again.
As I told you before we started recording, you're truly blowing the perception that a young IndyCar driver's life is straight up Jersey Shore gym tan laundry. So you out mowing the lawn. I kind of like that. We just got to work on the imaging a little bit. All right, let's get rolling here. We got a lot of great questions. Got about 45 minutes or so to record. And the first few definitely fall along a similar theme every time we've had you on. They've evolved a little bit, though, and it's about character and recovering from a rough patch in 2018. I figure let's go here first because it's always interesting to hear from you on these topics. We're going to go with Ryan Terpstra first. He says, Santino, every week you continue to exceed expectations for a rookie. IndyCar fans are extremely knowledgeable, and every week you continue to exceed what you're doing on track, but I see a number of fans who say, yeah, but remember what he did in Formula 2. And Ryan says, I certainly wouldn't want to be judged by all my decisions as a teen or even in my 20s. He says, with a year and most of your first IndyCar season now behind you, can you reflect on what happened at Silverstone? And what do you have to say about it today that maybe you didn't see or couldn't say at that time?
No, I think, like I said, it goes back to just being a lot more mature and behind the wheel and thinking about your decisions that you're making. And what's funny about that is, I think it reflects a lot more in the ovals because of the fact of how dangerous they are. And, I'm trying to make myself just more conscious and more aware of my actions. And I think that, that race obviously taught me a lot going forward. And, I like to think now that I'm completely different behind the wheel as far as my attitude, but I have the same trying to figure out how to work on the aggression to stay still aggressive on track, if that makes sense, and not being, and being intelligent about it. Like I had an opportunity to pass Simon when he was coming out of the pits, but I didn't just because, to me, it would have been a mistake to try and pass him into turn 2. And, you kind of see flashbacks of what happened last year. And then you see flashbacks of kind of what happened to Robbie in that turn. So, you just a little bit more conscious and a little bit more aware of what you're doing as a driver.
Also say the other angle here, which Andrew Bacca has asked, is an interesting one as well, and it's all the off the racetrack part. He says, Santino, in the time since your transition out of Formula 2, what's been your biggest personal lessons that you've learned and that you've applied? And also, how might you do things differently if you went back to Silverstone last year, both the original incident and how you handled the consequences afterwards? So, race car, racetrack aside, you as a 20, 21-year-old, how do you look back now at the off-track, the wave of reaction that came into you? How might you handle that differently? And how have you processed the consequences that have come?
Yeah, I think handling it the way I did, I was really confused and scared. I know I had made a mistake. And looking back at that, I should have been a lot more upfront about it right from the race onwards. And, that's something that I'd have to live with and something that, I had to adjust to. But what's funny about that is it teaches you a lot about yourself and being in the paddock. And also what I learned being in IndyCar is, I get to be more of myself. In Europe, I didn't realize how quiet and closed off I was, especially from like a family and friends point of view. Like, you look back at that and go, wow, I was, not a really open person. And I was, always to myself. And, now I'm always outside and hanging out with the fans and talking a lot about their races and what's
We're just trying to get you to shut up now. I mean, we've gone so far the opposite direction.
Yeah, funny enough, it's weird how that works, but I think it has a lot to do with, how comfortable I am. Like it's really stressful over there, and it's really hard to for people that haven't been over there and raced in that kind of pressure situation. It's really hard to describe what it's like. And, you come back home, and I look forward to going every race. And also, I'm not looking that far into the future anymore. I'm just looking at the next race, the next lap. Nothing crazy. I'm more living in the moment than, trying to live in the future. And I think that's had a massive impact on my life and my career and my attitude at the racetrack and on and off the track.
Let's go to one other topic on this theme, and it's real. So since since the incident last year, your Indian teammate Arjun Maini, you have been branded as a racist. And there are someone whom I've never met, never seen at a racetrack, wrote a hit piece about you on Jalopnik, which seemed to really stoke folks who take everything they know from the internet and run with it. You've been branded as a racist. I know that when we spoke last year around this time at Portland, did a bit of a deeper dive on this topic, was one that I don't know if you'd fully reconciled yet. It's a powerful accusation, Santino. It's not one that goes away easily with a year or so to process and seeing what comes in on social media, right? Not everything's glowing and, hey, we love you. You're doing wonderful in IndyCar. How do you process this? I'm not asking you to respond, to speak to whomever, but just curious, once you're branded with something like that, especially at a young age, that's not something that you can just choose to ignore, I would imagine.
No, I find it incredibly annoying, to be honest with you. And, it really upsets me that people are so quick to judge, because I feel like they judged it off of something that was all right, we'll be straight at it. We were trying to run the MAGA as request from my sponsor, who's very conservative. And I feel like people were quick to judge. I had to get a letter from the FIA saying I couldn't run it as per request. And to me, doesn't matter. I drive the race car. I don't control what goes on it. The only thing that I cared that was on it was the American flag next to my name. Because to me, that's my home country. That's my heritage. That's where my family's from. That's where I grew up. And I think the fact that because I had an Indian teammate who I was best friends with, and I am still friends with. Like, we grew up together as kids in karting. We were teammates in New Zealand, even though, funny enough, we drove for different teams. We were still teammates to each other. We trained every day together, and we had so much fun. I mean, he was actually one of the only people that came to my one of my birthdays I threw in Europe when I turned 17. He was the only driver I invited to come with me to have a dinner with in Italy.
Have you guys spoken since Silverstone?
I'm yet to reach out to him because he's not really big on social media, and I don't have his number. But I know we have some really close mutual friends that I saw not too long ago, and I asked how he was doing, and they said he's doing well and everything. So it's one of those things where I think I just want to be over with the season before I really start to reach out and stuff like that. But no, it's annoying because something like a title like that, just because your teammate, you don't think about that when you're driving a race car. Your job's to drive the race car. It doesn't matter who they are as your teammate. They're still your teammate. And to me, he was more than just my teammate. He was a friend. And I don't understand why people can't see that. Obviously you have like Nico Rosberg and Lewis Hamilton. Do you think they got along sometimes? Of course. Do you think they hated each other at times? Of course. They were teammates competing for a world championship, but Nico never got that branding. I mean, for me, I think it's because of the fact that I was, I am American, and what was trying to been put on the car and a couple other things that I don't agree with. And I don't agree with people's quick judgment to that. And so, it's just really annoying to me.
Well, as someone who's been branded an idiot for most of his life, I've yet to figure out how to remove that tag, and I'm probably not helping my cause as well. Let's move on. Let's go to Mike Shaw. Staying a little bit of a similar theme, but interesting evolution, he says. A year ago, many of us were understandably apprehensive about you joining the series based on what was in the news at the time. It says, yet coming to IndyCar, you've shown an exponential increase in maturity, highlighted by your willingness to say lift and fall behind Simon Pagenaud last weekend. It says, what do you attribute this increase in maturity to? It says, could it be the environment of IndyCar, learning from your own mistakes in the past, friends, family, all the above? He says, congrats on the great finish of 4th place, and I look forward to seeing you at Portland in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with maturity and that, but also I feel like IndyCar, it is a lot more of a dangerous category than most formulas because of the ovals. And I feel like I talked to James about this, and a couple other drivers. I feel like it's important that we take care of each other, because most of these guys do have families and stuff like that. And I'm still very young, and it's kind of our job to sit here and make sure that we all come back at the end of the day. I mean, it's going to always be a dangerous sport, no matter what you do for safety or improvements. At the end of the day, you still go out there and put your life on the line. And there's no reason to, in my opinion, coming up on Pagenaud, there's no reason to risk 4th for 3rd when there's another 70 laps to go and 2 pit stops. So it just kind of, wasn't going through my mind. Last lap, the Indy 500, okay, this is a different story. But you're looking at lap 120 of 200 at Pocono Raceway for a 3rd place, which, there's still so many variables left in the race that you never know where you can end up.
Let's go to Matthew Ponto, who says, Santino, what is the biggest surprise you've experienced racing on ovals that you were not expecting going into this season? And why do you think you've adjusted as well as you have?
Man, racing on them is unique. You kind of feel like you're back in a go-kart again at, one of these really long racetracks. And, I really enjoy the strategy of the ovals, where, you slot in behind cars and you're able to pass and run 2 wide or 3 wide sometimes. And, I just think the whole dynamic of the ovals, I've just really enjoyed as a racer, and also I think it comes down to the fact that I really haven't made that many decisions on my own. Like, you sit back and you look at all these races, and, I've always had someone in my ear talking me through it, getting me through there, Michael Cannon, Pancho Carter. It's one of those things to where even Sebastian, like, you have people that are there that have been doing this their whole lives, that have this great wealth of knowledge and experience. And on an oval, the best approach for me was to shut up and listen. And that's what I did. And I've just, I've been listening and just doing what I've been told. And, obviously by doing that, it showed that I can have really good results on these ovals, and I can race really strong and really hard. And listening and working with the team has been really good. It's been really good for me.
Let's see, where shall we go? We have many, many questions for you. And, let's jump around a little bit here. Let's jump around. Both Don Gregory and Steve Straub, thanks, Steve, sent in similar questions here. Don says, Santino, can you tell us about the supercar rally event you did for charity recently? I'd love to see it at every stop of the IndyCar calendar. And then Steve asks if you have any hobbies outside of racing and cars, and also says, great job with the charity car rally this weekend. Impressive to see a young man so dedicated to helping those less fortunate.
Yeah, the auto car rally was, something that came up in a meeting with IndyCar. We're trying to figure out ways to promote the tracks, to promote IndyCar, to do something different in the media. And my idea was to bring an auto rally behind to my home race, which was the Poconos, and to support a cause called Dream Ride. And what Dream Ride is, it's actually an event this weekend that goes on. I will be there on Sunday because we race Saturday night in St. Louis. And we fly in Special Olympics athletes from all over the world. I mean, all over. It doesn't matter how far. They get flown by a company, Bazzuto Foods, and the Hometown Foundation. And we bring in all these people. We raise, I believe it's upwards of $2 million. We bring hundreds and hundreds of cars together, tons of bikes, and we go out on what's called a cruise. And we take these Special Olympic athletes in our cars, and we go out on a complete road closed by all of the police in Connecticut. And we go out and do a little cruise around Farmington, Connecticut at the Farmington Polo Grounds, and get the chance to sit down and chat and share experiences with these athletes. And we make friends and family members, basically, because I still stay in touch with quite a few of the people quite a few of the athletes that I met last year at this event. And it's kind of awesome. It gives them a cool little trip to come to Connecticut, and gives them an experience to sit in a cool sports car. And the idea of the rally was to get a bunch of us friends together and to raise awareness for this event this coming weekend, because it is local to everybody in the Northeast, and to get more people to come out and witness it, and more people to bring cars out to give athletes rides. And I'd say it worked, and it was pretty successful. So, and we're looking at this year being much larger than the last as well already.
I love the fact that not only are you doing what you can to help raise money for a pretty cool charity, but also the fact that you're trying to connect with IndyCar to help even more unions between the things that drivers feel passionate about on the benevolence front, and tying that into the series where, in terms of recognition, the most amplification would happen. So that is great to hear. Let's go to Jerry Siddeth, who says, Santino, could you describe your thought process at Pocono in responding to the first lap crash and how you got through it safely? And did you, from not just seeing what happened last year with Robert Wickens, but just some of the crashes we've seen in recent years at Pocono, did that come with you into the start, Santino? Kind of I know things can get hairy here to start. Do I factor that into how I approach the opening laps? Curious there.
Yeah, no, when the mindset this weekend was tough for me. When you have that many people, it's really hard to get time to clear your mind. And, I needed a whole 2 hours to sit kind of almost by myself to just think about the race and think about getting through it. And, when you go green like that, and you go through turn one, everything looks really good and everything seems like it's going to be all right. And then you see a ball of smoke going down the backstretch going into two. The first thing that came on my mind was the lane where I was up high was clear. So I didn't want to brake, because when we come into the corner, everyone started to spin in. They're going to come up across the track. And, so I started to back out of the gas, and then I just got right back into it to try and get around and not get collected. And, seeing that the past accidents in a year, you don't really think about that when you're in the race car. You just try and think about, it's a 500-mile race. It's long. There's going to be a lot of opportunities, and there's no point in throwing it away in lap one by trying to be a hero. It's about survival. And I feel like that's kind of the mindset that I've always had going into the ovals, was just getting through and not mattering if I lose positions. Obviously, in the last two races, we've looked, especially Iowa, it was pretty wild. But I mean, those are more to do with luck and experience of my spotter, pushing me to test the limits. And but no, you go through something like that. I don't necessarily think Pocono is a more dangerous track than any other. I mean, yeah, of course, we've had some really bad accidents there, but the speeds that we race at in general on the ovals is dangerous. But we all know that as drivers. So, and I think just because we're coming down to the last 4 events, people are trying to go bigger and make bigger moves to get bigger rewards to, to finish off the year strong. And sometimes, in my opinion, a super speedway oval is not the place to do that. It's a very dangerous place, and, we need to keep taking care of each other.
Let's go to Tim Reagan, and this is tied a little bit to the supercar rally that we just spoke on. He said, what do you think the series and teams should do to attract more young fans, say from 18 to 25?
I don't know. There was this idea that another series in Europe did that I think was pretty awesome, was to take a couple of tracks. Let's take Pocono, for example. It's not really close to anything other than Wilkes-Barre, which is still not really close to anything. And you take, say, their grandstand level 100, which is kind of like the bottom grandstand. And you just say, anyone that comes, it's completely free. So to get people to come and witness an event in person, all those people on the car rally, they'd never been to an IndyCar race before. And they were all taken away at how cool it was and how awesome the racing is and how amazing the cars are and the pits and the garage and everything that goes on. They've never seen that before, and, they want to come back and they all want to do it again. And I feel like to get, sometimes what keeps people from coming and watching it on TV is, sometimes it's ticket prices. But I mean, if you open it up to get people to just come witness it and come see what it's actually like, whether it be, grandstand 100, grandstand 200, or general admission to somewhere where they can at least have some access to watch the race, I feel like that's the best way to get new and young fans to come out to the track and say, hey, let's go take our Sunday off and go do this, as opposed to sitting at home and turning it on the TV and watching.
I like that idea. I think there could be something there for sure. See, where else can we go here in the last 10 or 15 minutes or so that we have? Let's go to Stephen Kilsdonk, who says, Santino, if you could choose one Formula One car from the past and one Indy car from the past to turn some laps in, which cars would you choose and why?
Oh, man. I'd like to go really old school on the F1 car if I could. Maybe a little bit of the even pre-Senna era. I'd love to be in something in the 80s that's H pattern, heavy, big V10 engine, tons of power, huge tires, and just drive one of those sideways everywhere. Because back then I feel like, the cars today are so aero dependent and they're so, glued to the ground. I'd love to have something of the complete opposite, something that just slides and, you have to be, and you can feel the edge and you have to be on the edge to be quick. And same in IndyCar, just going back into the 90s to race in something like that would just be amazing and spectacular. I'm all about old school. I want the bigger engines, the bigger tires with no downforce whatsoever, to just go out and drive it hard. Because the driving of today, it's so precise and it has to be so perfect every lap, corner by corner. It really pushes you as a driver. And IndyCar, in my opinion, as far as today's cars go, are the most fun and they're the most free, and they're moving immensely compared to that of a Formula One car or even an F2 car. But to keep going in that direction would be amazing as a race car driver. It's something that I would love, and I'd love to go back to a sequential gearbox or something that's not on the steering wheel, just because I think it's a lot of fun to have 3 pedals and to really work the car and really work the gears.
What about on the IndyCar front, or similar thing?
Similar thing, very similar. Going back into the 80s. I'm not as familiar with going back into the history of IndyCar as I am, but I remember watching like the 90, I believe it was the 93 500 when Emerson won. And and watching that race kind of during the month of May. And man, that was spectacular. You know, going back to that era to race with those guys would be so cool.
I think we have a new initiative, Educate Santino on his IndyCar history. So for our dear listeners, if you see Santino and you have a great memory, be sure to stop and share it with him, or give him some homework, stuff to look up, watch, read about. Let's see. Let's go to Nathan DeRover. He says, Santino, you're well on your way towards being a fully paid IndyCar driver. What will your first big purchase be? Do you have an eye on a supercar, a boat, a plane? And after that, I'll have a little follow-up question for you.
No, to be honest with you, I'm really happy. You know, I love driving. I'm not really into boats, not really into planes. My dream car one day is to get a Koenigsegg Agera, but I am many, many, many years away from achieving one of those.
I can get you a 1/43rd scale model. Then maybe we'll get you a 1/12th. You know, just work your way towards it.
Sounds like a good plan, Marshall.
I'll be your financial advisor here. Adding on to Nathan's question, and I believe we have someone who sent this in. I apologize. I don't have your name right in front of me. Someone was asking options for next year. How are things going in terms of whether it might be returning to Dale Coyne Racing, exploring your options? How is that going in general, knowing that you probably can't say, you know, fill in all the details on teams and such, but how is that going, knowing that your team owner, someone who I genuinely love, is also at this time of year fairly active at looking at his options too?
Yeah, you know, I think I have quite a few options on the table, more than I was expecting to have. And it's tough to get a deal together. But I really like being teammates with Sebastian. That's one of those things that
you might be the first person who's ever said that. So Lord bless you, Santino.
Yeah, no, I mean, a lot of people says he doesn't get along with his teammates well or at all, and he never likes anybody. But to be honest, he's been more of a mentor to me this year than anything else. And you know, as a young driver like myself, that's invaluable to the learning curve. And it's, you know, teaches you so much about how to drive these cars, how to work with the engineers, and, you know, kind of, because he raced over in Europe, so we have similar background. So we have similar feedback, and we have a lot of similar traits. So we get along well in that respect. But there's definitely a couple options on the table, and you know, everything depends. You know, I feel like there's going to be some more interesting movements and news in the next 2 weeks than there is now. So we'll have to wait and see.
Would also mention here, you're currently 12th in the championship, 291 points. My beloved French fry, Monsieur Bourdais, is 10th in the standings, 300 points. Doing math in my head, you're 9 points behind your veteran 4-time champion teammate. We'll see how much he likes you. If you leap ahead of him in the championship there, it might be a little bit frosty from our man from Le Mans, but kidding aside, it has been cool. It truly, obviously knowing Seb and, you know, being pretty good friends away from the track, it's been cool to see him really trust you. That's the thing with Seb. If we're talking reputation, trust is paramount with him. And if he trusts you, you'll be let in. It's pretty cool to see that, frankly, at a time coming into this season, and as we open the show, there's whatever amount of people in the world who don't trust you, who are suspect. It's very interesting to see how getting a read, getting a feel, knowing how hard it is for Seb, I shouldn't say hard, but how much protection he puts around himself. He's not a fan of foolishness, stupidity, or otherwise. He really keeps things locked down and very narrow from a professional standpoint. It's been interesting to see him assess you and say, no, I can trust him. I'm going to let him in. Of the many things you've achieved this year, you might not know it now, but that in and of itself is pretty darn rare. Let's grab a couple more here before we need to get on with our days. Keith Lee says, congratulations on your solid and consistent rookie season so far. Very impressive. Do you have any desires or aspirations to still have a career in Formula One?
No. I was very happy to leave Europe behind. Just because of the fact, from a driver's standpoint alone, I got into racing for the fact that you show up every weekend knowing that you have a chance to win. That's one of the reasons I loved go-karts. It's one of the reasons I loved coming to the racetrack, because every weekend was a new weekend and every weekend was different. And the problem I have with Formula One is I don't want to sit there and show up every weekend knowing I'm going to finish 8th, or the best I can do is, 6th, and the average position I'm going to finish is 10th. That's I got in and loved the sport because I can win, and I can win races in IndyCar. And I feel like also on a mental standpoint, I'm really happy. Like, I really love the fans, I really love the tracks, I really love the teams, and I always have fun. There hasn't been a single race I've been to in IndyCar, spectating or racing, to where I didn't not have fun. And that's game changing to me. I think that's something where F1 can really learn from IndyCar. And I think that's where IndyCar excels very well.
All righty. Couple more here to close. Why don't we go to Kevin Frederico? It says, hey, Santino, is there any other type of racing series you want to try out? Sports cars, rallying, drifting, off-road, stock cars, sprint racing? What is it?
I've always wanted to do rally cars. It's like one of those things where, like, I feel like I love my car control, and I feel like I have a lot of it. And, rally cars has always been like one of my goals one day, to get into like a GRC car and just drive sideways for fun, and and enjoy it and work with the mechanics of that. And one of the races that's on my list as well is the Daytona 24, and I really hope I get a chance to compete in it this year, just because of the fact that I think I can do really well, and I feel like I work really well with others and with my teammates, and I have the ability to adapt into a sports car world, I think, to do a race like that. And I think I've proven as well this year that I can take care of the equipment, to say the least, having completed a lot of the laps. And I feel like those are the two things that are really on my list to try and run.
So we wind down here. We're going to go to Robbie Berggren, a topic I've saved here towards the end so we can riff on it a little bit. Someone very dear to my heart. He says, Santino, what is it about your race engineer, Michael Cannon, that makes him such a great engineer for a rookie driver?
He's no stress. Like, we show up at the racetrack and sit down. We chat for 30 minutes about the previous event, chat for 30 minutes about what happened last year at the event we're at now. And we just go through a plan and we say, this is what we're going to do. And if we have any objections, we'll go through it. And, he's been super informative. Like, we literally sit down for races and just go through exact run plans of what happened and how everything played out last year and what went wrong, what went right. And he just kind of wants you to have that experience of like you've raced there already. And that's super helpful in the dynamic because, he's also already setting the car up for my needs. And we're pushing harder and harder. And, we go through run plans and what we think is going to happen, what we think will play out. And he's just really calm and collected about it. And he never gets, at least he never gets frustrated with me and my patience, which is good.
Oh, you should see my phone blowing up. But yeah, he vents to others. No, I'm just kidding.
No, I mean, he's just, he's super calm and chill about everything. He just, we go into each weekend thinking we definitely got a shot at it. And I love that. It's nice to sit down and be like, all right, let's go out and kick some butt and take some names. So it's a lot of fun. He makes it very, very enjoyable for rookies, in my opinion.
And I think, Robbie, another aspect of what makes Michael unique, he and I worked together for many years in the junior open wheel formula, what we'd call the Road to Indy today. And he was my engineering mentor back at Genoa Racing. And so through Formula Atlantic, Indy Lights and such, he won a lot of races as an engineer, working with young drivers on the come up. Then we know that if we're talking the big, maybe most showy example, that was when he was at Players and AJ Allmendinger came into the team, and I think they ripped off like 5 wins in a row. Just amazing. And I think what I've seen, if we now add in, say, a Ed Jones, who was just a rocket and so impressive in his rookie season at Coyne and Michael's car, you now, etc., I think Michael thrives in particular with younger drivers because there is not that massive, fully baked in, this is what I want, this is how I need it, just get it there every race. I believe the more collaborative environment with a younger driver who's still learning and therefore maybe more open to ideas on setup. Not as if Michael's going to be doing something bizarre and strange, but just...
We've already done that.
Yeah, instead of, someone, I've mentioned this before, sometimes it can be really helpful when the driver knows so much. As a race engineer, you just become, that person at the McDonald's window receiving their order. I'll take a number 2 with a Diet Dr. Pepper and medium fries. Got it. Change, go out, car goes faster. That doesn't always work, though. So when you have a younger driver, I believe, who, again, is maybe more open to a collaborative process of coming to the right setup, I think that's just really an area based on Michael's extensive experience working with young drivers that, hey, when you come in and Ed Jones, etc., AJ Allmendinger, there's a really good bond that can be built instead of just really being more dictated to, which can happen at times. So I'm not exactly sure if that's how you guys always work, but it sure seems like it from your results.
That, and, he's not quick to judge. He loves the fact that he believes in the fact that all drivers have ability. He's not going to sit there and be like, he's a wanker. He's going to sit there and try and find the ability in you as well. He's one of those guys that's always trying his best for you, and you feel that, and it makes you try harder as well.
Let's go to Jordan Darwin, one of our last 2 questions. He says, Santino, how did you get the Carters as your spotters? And he also asks, how do you know how much grip the Highline will have on the start or restart of an oval race?
So, funny enough, in my time of spectating last year at some of these oval races, Pancho, I spent a little bit of time with Pancho, and he knew my racing background, and he told me that if I was ever in the car, he wants to spot for me, not because I need to be pushed, but because sometimes I need to be reeled back. And he said he loves working with drivers that have that, sort of no fear and aggressivity. And because I feel like he drove the same way. And so because of that, I trust him completely. And what he says, I'll do. So going into the start of Iowa, going up in the high lane as a driver for the first time, I don't know if it has grip. I'm just going to guess that because Pancho's probably been there and done that he's right. And that car, when I put it up there, it's going to stick. It's one of those things to where I trust what he says. And same thing at the Poconos. We started that race and we were 3 lanes up in turn 1. And the philosophy that we've created together was you're not at full speed going into lap 1, turn 1. Everyone's lifting, everyone's on the brakes, everyone's slowing down. It's like a traffic jam. when you're behind another car, you're in dirty air, you're in a wake, the car's not going to handle as well. So if you can get a lane up, not all the way to the wall, but another lane up to where there's going to be no marbles, the track's clean, you're obviously already going slower, and there's no dirty air in front of you, there's no reason why you can't carry that little bit of extra speed, whether it be 5 or 10 miles an hour, faster than what you're doing on the low lane. You're also opening up the radius of the corner so you don't have to turn the wheel as much. So the car, in theory, should stay for at least a lap or two at a set speed. And I trust that theory, and I trust him when he tells me to go up there, to go up there. And, you know, I think it's one of those things in Indy, going over that 500-mile race with him and his son in my ear, pushing me to keep getting up there on restarts and starts, to that it will have grip, and eventually figuring out that, damn, it does, you know, car's going to stick, to where, you know, I have a lot more trust built in, to where if he tells me to go up high and I'm going to stick, I'm going to go up high and the car's going to stick. So.
Not a bad thing to have the Carters in your ears. Let's go to
no,
Bob.
Not at all.
Let's go to Bob Fay, who says, Santino, I live just a couple of towns away from you in Seymour, Connecticut. Wanted to let you know that our whole house cheers for you. Says we hope to be able to catch up with you sometime at the car show in Oxford, Connecticut as well. Says my question is pretty straightforward. Was just wondering if your runs at Indy and Pocono were the fastest you've ever gone in a race car.
Yes, actually. I think being at Indy was the fastest I've ever been in a race car. It was like just under 240, which was pretty crazy. I mean, when you sit there with the high boost levels for Fast Friday and you're sitting in the tow trying to catch another driver with trimmed out downforce, and you're just going, oh my gosh, you're literally hanging on as a passenger, like, don't lift. That was impressive, and that was just the amount of adrenaline that you get from that was just incredible. But no, I hope to see him at, you know, we do these car shows every Sunday in Oxford that he's talking about, where we bring, you know, tons of people and friends together, and I'll probably see him there this Sunday night if we hold another one.
I love it. All right. Well, I lied. I'm going to throw in one more here. Closing question, which I like. Comes in from Len R. on the good old tweeters. He says, race fans are lazy. We give all racers nicknames, or at least shortened versions of their names. Taku, Hinch, RHR, Seb, Dixie. Does Santino have a nickname that we can use? He says, may I suggest Tino, Sonny? And then Jeremy from HBG sent in with his vote of haircut. So what, do you have a nickname? Have you heard any nicknames? We're trying to come up with something. Not that Santino's bad, but clearly it doesn't fit the convention that Len mentions.
No, funny enough, so when I was living in Italy, I was always called Santi, S-A-N-T-I, which is a derogative of my origin of my name, Santo, S-A-N-T-O, which is my great-grandfather's name. But I'd almost prefer to leave the European name behind. And a couple of my close family friends call me SF, because, you know, what's funny is we have a lot of people I'm friends with a lot of people that are, you know, the first, second, or third generation of the same name. So you go like T1, T2, T3, and stuff like that. So we just end up with a shortened version of SF. And that comes from my friend Tim. But to be honest with you, I kind of like it because it's a little catchy. But
SF?
That's up to race. Yeah, it's up to race fans.
I mean, when I hear SF, I think San Francisco. So
do I. But
okay.
Also, I thought Scuderia Ferrari at first.
All right.
I mean, I see your mind's in a different place, Marshall.
Oh, I'm from San Francisco, so I guess that's kind of not too much of a surprise. All right. Well, we're closing the show with a question. We need some ideas. We need some hashtags for a proper, I'd say, Americanized nickname for Santino, because you have a beautifully Italian name, but clearly I think folks want something easy. Sonny, for example.
Sonny.
Yes.
Like Sonny's Barbecue. Thank you, Dale.
Hey, I mean, look, could you do that? How much would it cost, Dale, for you for a week, maybe a race, I don't know, to change your name to Sonny and then just fully rep Sonny's barbecue. There's some options in here.
I want to rep the Sonny's barbecue car for sure. Are you kidding? That'd be amazing. Then we could put whatever Paul Tracy called me on the Portland race last year, Sonny Ferrucci or something. Something hilarious. It was like a joke.
Boy. All right. Well, look. All right, dear listeners, we got a job here. We need to come up with some options for nicknames for our man Santino Ferrucci. Always appreciate you spending some time. Always appreciate the fact that when you and I speak and we have questions from folks that aren't just super easy softballs, you have never ducked them or taking them. And so I do appreciate that as well. Obviously, look forward to the final races of the year and to see how you close this out. 9 points behind the old man. Again, he might start a little frosty. A little frostiness might be in the air if you pass him in the championship, but boy, that wouldn't be a bad thing for you as you look towards a second year in IndyCar.
No, not at all. I mean, also, it's funny is like I don't look at it like I'm racing Sebastian either, which is kind of strange. Like I don't feel like I'm racing him for a championship. We're like in our own championships here. I mean, we're pushing each other to get the car better and the team better and everything else. So I think the championship to us, whether who B2, is irrelevant to both of us, which I think is pretty cool.
Kory Enders, glad to have you on your first appearance, the Week in IndyCar podcast, our weekly look inside the Road to Indy, getting to know some of the drivers like yourself who have yet to be on the show and bring a little bit more depth to what our awesome partners at Cooper Tires happen to do in trying to elevate the next generation of open wheel star. Hopefully, let's look at your upbringing, Kory. It's one I find rather interesting. There are musical notes throughout your world. There's all kinds of interesting things throughout your world. A nationally ranked chess player as well. I believe online chess, though, you might have to clarify whether you actually go to live in-person tournaments. It seems like, I don't know, a less linear background than we find with a lot of young drivers, and I love that. Complexity is awesome.
Yeah, Marshall, I'm one of those people that kind of like dabbles around in everything. Like when I was younger, I was really into computers. I don't know if it mentions that anywhere what you're reading, but I did a lot of programming when I was younger, and I love to build like computer programs and reprogram games to the way I wanted them to be. That was something I picked up really at a young age, and just started working from there. And that was around the time I started go-karting, actually. And to kind of touch on the chess, I do play online, or I did play online tournaments. I recently did a chess interview at the Texas Motor Speedway during the IndyCar race regarding my past in chess and like how I kind of got into it and how I relate it to racing. That's a really interesting article, I think, if you're interested in knowing how I compare like my chess style to the way I drive. Because I think there's a lot to do, like a lot of comparisons between chess and racing.
Well, since this is audio, reading would probably not do my listeners much service. So why don't you tell us the parallels that you've seen between the two?
Sure thing. I can do that. So basically, the way I play chess is a very aggressive style. I don't know if you play chess, Marshall.
I tried and realized that checkers were about my pace.
Hey, checkers is really fun too, though.
Oh, it's fun. Well. It's checkers is chess minus the intelligence, which is why it worked so well for me.
Interestingly, there's actually quite a bit of strategy that goes into checkers. I bet I could win 9 out of 10 checkers games that I play. It comes down to a little bit of luck, but there is a strategy to it, to winning. I can show you sometime when we meet again in person.
It sounds like this is going to be a heck of a lot of fun at a racetrack that has nothing to do with racing. It's kind of my thing.
Yeah, I'm one of those people that I like to, when I'm at the track even, I like to try to disconnect from racing after I've done my debrief, after, we've gone over everything with the engineer. We actually have like a little game system set up in the trailer, and I like to just completely disconnect and then come back to it and try to, recall all those things that we went over and try to test myself to see how well I like really listened in the debrief. I like to do a lot of things. I like to distract myself and just kind of do tests on myself throughout the day. But kind of getting back to the chess, sorry, I got off track there. I like to play very aggressively in chess, which I think is interesting because I don't drive extremely aggressively. I'm a very calculated driver, and obviously there's a lot of calculations going on in chess. So that's kind of where I tie the two together is, you have to think quite a few moves ahead in chess. I think the same goes for racing. When you're coming into turn one on the first lap and all these cars are around you, you have to think, okay, where is he going to go? Is he going to try to pass me? Is he going to try to pass the car ahead? Should I go to the inside? Should I go to the outside? There's just a lot of calculation that goes into it. And I think playing chess actually helps train that part of your mind, which is something I think a lot of drivers don't really do, is a lot of mind training. And I think that's a huge part of racing because it's such a mental sport.
I love the aspect, probably more than anything, Kory, that you're looking for ways to stretch your understanding. And understanding obviously being a generalism, but compared to maybe too many drivers who can hold basic conversations, but you can tell there hasn't been a lot of development between the ears on anything other than driving. I do appreciate the fact that you are looking at ways to stretch your viewpoints from a strategy standpoint, just the grasping the reality in front of you, spatial awareness, if you want to call it that, but having to plan, strategize, incorporate a lot of things that aren't just pure instinct, which can often be the only thing that drivers gravitate towards. Do you find yourself with the ability, Kory, to tap into that primal mind when you need? Because the flip side to this is there are some drivers, Charlie Kimball comes to mind, who is extremely smart. We know he is. His brain is just, it's a beautiful thing. There are times, though, where thinking brain Charlie compared to animal brain Charlie might have a stronger presence than it needs. Curious for you if you've been able to switch between needs behind the wheel or if you gravitate more towards one.
That is a very interesting question, Marshall, and I have a definite answer. And it's that I'm working on, toning that aggressive side of my brain. As you said, I do gravitate more towards the calculated approach to things, thinking about everything one step at a time and really understanding what's going to happen and try to predict everything. And sometimes, especially in the kind of racing that I do in Indy Pro 2000, it just doesn't work. You have at best in the final race, 50 minutes to get the job done. And this year we've been struggling a little bit in qualifying pace. We have such a competitive group of guys out there. And we've just been struggling a little bit, but I think we've got things under wrap for next year and towards the end of this year for sure. But it just doesn't, it's really hard to switch between those two things. It's either like you're one or the other. I'm trying to get a balance of the two for when I'm on track, but it really is a tough thing to do, Marshall.
Simon Pagenaud is another perfect example of this, and he'll readily admit that so much of what he does off the track is to prepare his mind and just prepare his, entire being for not over-calculating behind the wheel, because he is a person who will let, the proverbial 1,000 different equations run through his mind, like he can reach out into the air and move the numbers and, he can fall into that position. And it's great when you are needing to do that, but there are times where you just need to be, honestly, as dumb and reactive or proactive as can be in the proverbial zone where you're not thinking, you're just doing. And so for him, that's been a big part of his career, whether it's meditation, a lot of reading, a lot of research on how to, learn how to switch between those two mental states based on the situational needs. So you, as a much younger driver, I would not expect you to be in that place yet, but just know you're not the only guy. Full IndyCar
Very
champions, Indy 500 winners have this same dynamic. There are others, like a Scott Dixon, who I love to say looks like he falls out of bed 5 minutes before the race. Just like, oh,
Yeah.
okay, all right, well, I'll climb in. Oh, I won. All right, that was cool. Bye. You go, what did you just do? How do you do that?
Yeah.
People have been stressing and pacing for hours thinking about how they're going to try and beat you, and you're like, oh, that was fun. Where are we going for dinner? Granted, also brutally smart, but he's able to compartmentalize and draw from what he needs when he needs it. So again, for some, it's just nature. That's how it works. For others, like Simon, maybe yourself, it's a learned thing, but at least you've seen examples of those who can make the most out of it. Spray a lot of champagne, cash some big checks too. Well, let's do this, Kory. Got a couple of questions that have come in, and we'll go to Robbie Bergren first. He says, Kory, what do you think you need to improve the most to continue ascending up the Road to Indy ladder?
I think it's just that, what we were just talking about, actually. It's really a hard thing to switch between those two mindsets. And for my entire life, everything I've done between chess and programming and music, it's all been very calculated and very focused, and just thinking extremely deep into things, sometimes too deep. And every other thing I've done, I've been able to pick up on it very quickly. And there was a huge incline in my ability in racing at the start, but I've seemed to hit this plateau where I just need to really step back and let my primal instinct take over, and just let the talent that I have drive me around the track. Sometimes that's just what it takes. You just have to completely get in the zone, as some say, and drive.
Before we get to the other couple of questions that we got, wanted you to tell us more about the D-Force racing team that you are with. One of many high-quality Road to Indy teams, and I'll throw a but in here, and the but is not a negative, it's just a transition. But D-Force, compared to some of the bigger names that have maybe been around for decades, or if we think in Indy Lights terms, an Andretti Autosport and so on, that truly have big name cachet, I wouldn't put D-Force in that same position, but that doesn't mean they are any less talented or capable. So for those who aren't aware of the team you drive for, tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, so D-Force Racing, I'll just start with how we started. I was testing in the old Pro Mazda. You're familiar with the old chassis, I'm sure. The Star Mazda.
I've engineered many. I've built them. Yes.
Yes.
Love them to death.
No, you're familiar with those. Those are awesome cars. I was doing some testing with David Martinez, who is one of our team owners. And we decided that, since it was the last year, this was 2016, I believe. Yes, 2016. It was the last year they were going to be running that car at actually, no, it was not. It was 2 years to go before they were going to drop that car and move on to the new chassis. But they were running at Laguna Seca for the Soul Red finale in 2016. And we decided to make our debut. And D-Force was nothing but an old go-kart trailer, basically, like to hold maybe 5 or 6 go-karts. So a big go-kart trailer, but a go-kart trailer nonetheless. 3 mechanics, an engineer who was also our team owner, David, and our other team owner, Ernesto, who just kind of helped organize the mechanics. Since everybody spoke Spanish on the team but me, this was quite a learning curve, since I had no idea how race weekends worked. Thankfully, David spoke English, and he was also my coach, and he kind of got us through it. But that was our debut. And since then, 3 years later, we've grown into we're running now 3 series, which is USF4, Indy Pro 2000, and USF 17. 2 of those in the Road to Indy, and we are actually looking to grow. So to answer your question there, Marshall, we are also taking the calculated approach in this building a race team. I like to think that Moy, who is my teammate, and I play a huge part into the growth of D-Force Racing. And we like to kind of make all our decisions together with our team owners. And we see a lot of growth in the near future. We're doing a lot of things behind the scenes. I'm not going to talk too much about it because it's confidential, but we're doing quite a few things behind the scenes to improve our team and to make sure that we are much more competitive in the years to come. And not only just competitive, but to make sure that we grow into all sorts of different series. I think our end goal is actually to have an IndyCar team and be one of the only Road to Indy teams that actually has a full progressive ladder from USF 17 to Indy Lights, and then you're able to move from Indy Lights to our car and IndyCar. That's the goal, that's the dream, and that's kind of what we're aiming for now. It's definitely a few years off, but something we're definitely striving for.
Confidentiality on the road to Indy, boys and girls. I love it. But that's a wonderful thing, though, and that's why I have liked this little team. I have enjoyed watching its progression. Mr. Martinez as well, with his background in the sport. I mean, it's a great thing to see something like this start to build, and great to see that for a young driver like yourself, you tend to get two situations, and you are in a third. You either get the family team, straight up mom and dad, not necessarily mom and dad, turning wrenches, but hey, we created the team for our son, for our daughter. Or hey, we just paid a lot of money to go to whatever team and we're a client. Being somewhere in the middle, kind of like you are, of being able to really help shape and steer and help things build as well while you're doing all of those things, shaping yourself, building yourself, trying to steer upwards. I really, I like this for you, and I wonder if this could be something that more young drivers look at, say, how could I be a little bit more a piece of the foundation here than just someone who, came and went, and you guys were just a step on my own progression, but ultimately disposable. So I love what you have going on there.
And I just wanted to throw this out there. I'm not sure of the demographic who's listening, but if there's anyone who's my age, which is 22, somewhere around there, and, I chose to take, this is kind of random, but also related. I wanted to say that basically if you're thinking about like going to college or not going to college, because I know that's a situation that a lot of people my age are faced with nowadays, because social media is completely changing the way that we think about everything. And it's making people believe that you can just go out there and become, an influencer and be an Instagram model and all that kind of stuff. I just want to say that it is absolutely possible to do whatever you want to do at this age. Because, when I was in high school, I was faced with the choice of either going racing or going to college. I was actually thinking about going to MIT for electrical and hardware engineering. I was going to get my double master's in those. I decided that going racing would be more fun. And I'm slowly realized, but definitely certainly realized, that you have to make a career out of it. It can't just be fun forever. You have to make a career out of it. So, making a business relation to the team and, help form that business and be a part of it and actually, take away a profit from it. And, that's a very satisfying feeling. So to any drivers out there my age or even younger listening, it's just, I want, try to be as inspirational as you can be, because that's what I go off of. I think, how can I be inspirational to people my age who are confused right now about what they want to do? Just kind of tying that back into the D-Force thing. It's just, there's a lot of confused people out there, because a lot of kids my age ask me like, okay, how did you do this? How did you become a race car driver? And you just, a lot of it is luck, and you fall into a good position and then you make the most of that position. You just have to make the most of your position, basically.
I love it. Young and inspiring. I mean, you're ticking a lot of boxes here, Kory. Let's continue with our man, Jameen Tuttle, who always sends in great stuff. Says, Kory, this year seems like it's been difficult, but you seem to be getting the most you can out of your car. Do you have any idea for your plans for 2020 yet? He has a second question for you, but are you thinking, hey, maybe another year at the Indy Pro 2000 level would be the right thing? Or are you thinking Indy Lights is attainable? It's always a pivotal question, right? If you're not on that championship march, do you spend another year thinking there might be more things to learn? Or do you say, randomness is the thing that has set me back. There's no need to spend another year here.
I love that question. And it really comes down to, there's always more to learn. I don't care how long a car has been around, how many people have worked on it, how many times it's been torn apart and analyzed. There's always more to learn. These cars are so sensitive to everything. I mean, you can tune a car in so many different ways. You can do something on a car to make it feel a certain way in so many different ways. And it's just the way you do it can affect and can be affected in so many different conditions. So to answer your question, I am going back to Indy Pro 2000 next year. We have huge plans to be a lot more competitive next year. I think.
Can we announce the Team Penske Alliance right now, or should we keep that under wraps?
Yeah, Roger Penske coming over as our team owner.
RP is going to be your strategist too.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, when he tells you to pit for the first time, just go ahead and ignore him. All right, you just stay out there for the full race. But that sounds. Yeah. I mean, but I love the fact, and that does sound great, Kory. Though that while we're not that far away from finishing the season, but you have already said, okay, we're going to dig in and get more next year. Plus, we're not just going to try and do we'll give it another attempt and see what turns out. You and the team are saying, okay, here are the things we believe we can already do better. Let's build in some additional infrastructure and or make some changes. The fact that you're at that stage now compared to October or November, that's very impressive.
And, it's not just about me, Marshall. It's about the drivers to come on our team. I see myself as more than just a driver on the team. I love this team. I built this team with David and Moy and Ernesto. We did so much for it, and I want the drivers who come on our team to drive a fast car. And I love working with the team. We have a really tight family within the team, and we're able to communicate with each other really, really well. So we all know what we need to do. It's just a matter of doing it. So we're going to do that again next year and try to make the car fast for drivers to come in the next couple of years.
Jimmy also asks, he says, I saw that you're also a driver for the local Sugar Land, Texas car dealers, believe that being Mercedes and McLaren. He says, so what does that involve and how did you get the gig?
So I got the gig because my dad actually owns the two dealerships. So we kind of created a combination of things. The car, I'll focus mainly on McLaren for right now, but I'll move on to Mercedes. McLaren is a very high-end car. I'm sure you're obviously familiar with it. They recently came out with production cars, and not a whole lot of people know about the production side of McLaren. So what I do is I take people on track. We have on-track events. We invite potential clients, and they can bring their friends and whoever they like. And I take them around for hot laps on our local track in Angleton, Texas, called MSR Houston. And we go around that track and basically I try to explain as much as I can about the car to people. I'm like a driving salesman, if you will. I kind of pitch the car to people while we're driving around the track at like 160, 170 miles an hour, which is a lot of fun. People usually needed a little bit repeat of information afterwards, but it's a ton of fun. And I essentially do the same thing for Mercedes. I'll touch quickly on it as well. I did a webisode, or I guess you'd call it a webisode, on YouTube called Hot Laps, where I teamed up with Mercedes-Benz of Sugar Land and McLaren Houston to kind of take local celebrities, influencers from around the Houston area around in the cars and just kind of scare them on camera while talking about the cars. So those actually did really well and increased sales quite a bit, increased our website traffic, increased our social media presence. So we've been doing a lot of work. I just kind of work on the social media side and the marketing side of, McLaren Houston and Mercedes-Benz Sugar Land, driving them around and making sure that everybody is informed about McLaren, basically.
Well, that sounds like you're a pretty busy young man. Let's close with a fun question here from our man. I'm assuming it's a man. It could be a woman, so my assumption could be false. IndyCar says, what does Mr. Enders look forward to most about visiting St. Louis and Gateway? Referring to this coming weekend's jam-packed open-wheel jamboree, the Bomberito Automotive event. He says, got any barbecue recommendations? And are you going to try and swim in the Mississippi River for a post-race victory celebration?
That sounds like a lot of fun. Hopefully we are doing a post-race win celebration because we had a ton of pace in the last official test last week over there. We were actually third, only 2/10 off of first.
Yep.
For the first time in the season, we saw a glimpse at the top there, and it was really promising. So, we're keeping our heads cool. A test is a test, and you have to take it with a grain of salt. You never know what people are doing or what they're testing or working on. But we're going to, come in with our heads high for the race and see if we can catch ourselves a podium, maybe even a win. I mean, that would be great. We'd love to get a podium this year. That would just really brighten our moods for next year.
You need a little bit of mood brightening. I'm never sure, though, Kory, having done this for a really long time, I've never come to a conclusion whether getting towards the end of a crappy year, not saying your year's been crappy, but getting towards the end of a year where, boy, we just haven't had that result we really feel like we should, whether getting something positive towards the end of the year is the best thing, or if completing the year in that state of frustration is actually going to serve you the most during the off season, the proverbial thorn in your paw not being removed. I'm not saying you and those in that state wouldn't remain hungry if you did have a positive finish, but never really come to a conclusion as to whether it'd be better to truly just have a punishing year or one that just didn't live up to expectations and have that sitting in the pit of your stomach all throughout the off season, or if having that little bit of relief maybe in a race or two towards the end of the year would be better. What do you think?
Well, I can tell you this. I agree with you completely. It's tough to say. We will remain hungry no matter what. But if I'm coming towards the finish line and I'm in a podium position, I'm not lifting my foot off the gas. That's for sure. I mean, I'm gonna push through to the end. If we get that podium, I mean, it's gonna brighten our moods for a minute. But we're definitely gonna remain hungry. There's nothing that can change that, because this year has been a very frustrating year for everyone on the team. We all feel like we deserved a lot more for the work that we put in, a lot more pace, a lot more out of the car, and we just haven't been getting it. And we just need that last little push to get us there, and I think that's what we're going to have next year for sure.
Kory, thanks for spending some time with us. Hoping folks will follow you throughout the rest of the season. In particular, pay much closer attention as we head into 2020 and the upcoming, not yet for public consumption, but some tweaks and changes at D-Force that we hope will allow you and the rest that come along the race with you guys be a much stronger presence in and around the podium. So thanks again, my man.
Thank you so much, Marshall.
And that was Santino Ferrucci from the Dale Coyne Racing team and Kory Enders from the D-Force team in Indy Pro 2000 on the Road to Indy, presented by Cooper Tires. If you haven't had a chance yet, you might check out MarshallPruettPodcast.com. It is where all 600 plus episodes happen to live, broken down into a variety of categories that you might enjoy, and also every method possible to subscribe. Apple Podcasts has been, I think, about 50%, right around 50% of where traffic is coming from, so that might be the easiest place to subscribe from, but there are plenty of other options we have included on our little subscribe page on MarshallPruettPodcast.com. All right, let's get going. Let's move on to here. Hopefully we'll roll right into the next episode coming up on your set list. This being your Q&A, 3+ hours of me talking a little bit of crap.